I'm Sarah Scoles. I'm a science journalist and a contributing reporter at Wired and Popular Science, coming to you from the National Book Festival and also from my dining room / study in Denver, Colorado. I'm the author of a book called They're Already Here, UFO Culture and Why We See Saucers. And this is a book that I never really expected to write. I have never really been that interested in UFOs, although aliens have been a perpetual fascination. But a few years ago, a lot of you may recall, UFOs started being in the news because the New York Times revealed the existence of a Pentagon investigation program into UFOs. And I started doing some reporting on that, and I was totally new to the subject. And in doing the reporting, I just met all these fascinating people who were not the types of people who I thought would be interested in UFOs. I kind of imagined it of just this den of conspiracy, but there were really a lot of smart archivists and researchers and investigators who were just really compelled by this perpetual mystery that has been part of world and especially American history for the past 70 years or so. And I became fascinated with why people are fascinated with UFOs and what role they have played in our culture and history, looking at how they're bound up with politics and religion and pop culture. And each chapter of the book just kind of tries to take a look at UFOs from one of those different lenses, either someone who's interested in the historical angle or the conspiratorial angle or how UFOs function as a kind of spirituality. And so it just kind of involves me going on a lot of road trips around the American West, talking to lots of different people about why they find UFOs to be such a compelling topic. So the US government has been studying UFOs for a very long time, kind of off and on, beginning not long after the famous crash in Roswell, New Mexico in 1947. When this happened, there was a rancher named William Brazel who just found this debris on his ranch. And this was soon after the first modern, quote unquote, flying saucer was seen and was reported in the news. And so when this rancher came across this debris on his property, he thought, hey, maybe this is one of those flying saucers like I saw in the newspaper. And he contacted the local sheriff, who contacted the local military, who actually put out a press release that said, hey, we did find one of these flying saucers. And they soon retracted that and said it was actually just a weather balloon. Decades and decades later, it was revealed that it was neither a flying saucer nor a weather balloon, but was actually a top secret nuclear test detection device that flew at high altitudes. But the story, no matter what, kind of catalyzed interest about UFOs among regular people and also in the government. And so soon after this, the Defense Department undertook investigations, 3 investigations that ran from the late 1940s until 1969, where they would investigate UFO reports, try to figure out what they were, and then publish the results. And they, the military, they were concerned, are these a threat to our warfighters? What is going on here? Should we be concerned about American airspace? And that kind of leads into what we see now. In December of 2017, the New York Times and Politico both kind of at the same time published bombshell articles that revealed a program called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, which was allegedly a program run out of the Pentagon to do essentially what these older programs had done for decades, which was investigate sightings, figure out what they were, figure out if they were a threat to the nation in some capacity. And at the same time, there were 3 videos released in the following couple of months that showed military jets capturing unidentified objects on their cameras. And so there was just this explosion of interest among, I would say explosion of interest anyway, among the general public and also politicians and people interested in threats to the U.S. And so since then, we've seen things like, the military has new UFO reporting guidelines that they're crafting. Politicians are getting classified briefings on what UFOs are or are not. And there's a new task force for investigating what we're now supposed to call UAP, or unidentified aerial phenomena, because that's more serious than UFOs. So I've had kind of a perpetual fascination with aliens since I was very young. I watched the movie Contact when I was 12 years old, which is about a scientist who discovers a communication from aliens. And I was just always so fascinated that, this was someone's job to ask questions like, are we alone in the universe? What are we doing here? Who else is out there? That they got paid to use telescopes to try to find that out. And that, fascination with someone else's career led me to write my first book, which is called Making Contact, which is about Jill Tarter, who is the scientist who's kind of been at the head of the search for extraterrestrial intelligence for decades and decades. But, I come from the world of hard science. And so while I thought a lot about radio broadcasts or laser transmissions from distant alien civilizations, science in general thinks of UFOs as something totally different and much more improbable because it involves those smart aliens building ships and coming specifically to Earth, which seems like a very unlikely thing. So I had kind of just relegated that to the realm of pseudoscience and something I was not interested in, and kind of had thought of the people who were interested in it as the same. So my own interest in this kind of tangential topic surprised me, and I did come in cold, even though I'd been thinking about little green men far away for a very long time. In popular culture, when we talk about UFOs, that technically just means unidentified flying object. It has nothing technically to do with aliens. And that is part of, I think, the reason why we have a new acronym that people in military and government circles use, unidentified aerial phenomena, to kind of divorce the concept of something unexplained in the sky from aliens. And right now, we've recently learned about a program called the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, where people within government are going to be investigating UFOs and also providing an unclassified report on what they find to politicians, and I think also to the public. So getting a little more information out there. But what's interesting when people from the Pentagon or politicians talk about these UAP, they're in general not talking about aliens. They're talking about, they talk about unmanned aerial systems, which are drones or advanced technology that a foreign country might be working on that might be in advance of ours. And some people speculate even, special programs within our own government that certain other parts of the government just aren't privy to. And so I think, mostly when we talk about this in government, it's in the context of weapons and threats and not, cosmic wonder about what aliens might be visiting us from space. So there's more data taken on Earth and on what's going on this planet than there ever has been in history. It's gathered by satellites, it's gathered by ground stations. There's a company called Planet that takes a picture of the entire Earth every day. There is not a spot on this Earth that is not seen by some instrument. And what the UFO world has always lacked is hard data and systematically collected data. But we are at the point where we could have that. We could know what is going on in the skies at all times. And in the private sector and in government also, we have these collection systems that could be appropriated to look for unidentified things. And there are some efforts to do that. And I think that will help us figure out what is truly unidentified in the sky versus what just like I can't identify when I look up there, and kind of separate those two things. And that kind of systematic data gathering is actually what helped turn fields like this, the actual search for extraterrestrial intelligence, into a hard science, kind of laying out these bounds of investigation and being able to say, like, yes, we see something here. No, we don't see something here. And so I think we're either about to find out something really exciting or find out that there's not really anything to be excited about. I spent about a year and a half reporting this book, which is kind of fast for a nonfiction book, but because UFOs were so in the news and the subject, especially related to this Pentagon program, was so timely, I kind of wanted to get it out while it was still new and relevant. So it was kind of a whirlwind of trying to insert myself into the UFO universe and find out who was important and who knew what they were talking about. And so I spent a lot of time listening to very long, unedited UFO podcasts and kind of creating an RSS feed of all the UFO blogs and just kind of, you know, digging into that world quietly without actually becoming a part of it, and then contacting individual people. I think one of the most interesting people I met, his name is Jorg Arnu, and he lives in a town called Rachel, which is just outside of Area 51. And for around 20 years, he's been running a website on the internet where he just goes on adventures, kind of probing the boundaries of this very secretive military base that wasn't even officially acknowledged till 2013. Just kind of trying to figure out, you know, what are they flying? What are they researching? What is actually going on there? And he doesn't believe that aliens fly flying saucers. He's just really fascinated by this very federal mystery. And I think even though he doesn't believe in aliens or UFOs in the traditional sense, he was a really illuminating character for me because he was just so compelled by having a modern mystery that he probably would not be able to solve in his lifetime because he doesn't have a security clearance and definitely isn't allowed into Area 51. And I think that is what compels a lot of people who research UFOs is that it's a mystery they can't solve. They can spend their whole lives trying to figure it out, and they never will. And another person who was very interesting to me was a man named Chris Rutkowski, who runs the Canadian UFO Survey. And so the Canadian government is actually much more forthcoming with their UFO data than the US government is. And so he kind of collects all the reports for the whole country and just does analysis on them and is kind of just this keeper of UFO knowledge, and so has a very kind of sober surveying take on the whole community. UFO enthusiasts really run the gamut from full believer to full skeptic and debunker. And the people who I started with researching were the people who were on the far skeptic end, who a lot of them haven't even seen a UFO at all. Most of them don't say, yeah, this is aliens. They are just really compelled by a mystery and have the free time to do things like go through historical documents or help collect sighting reports. A lot of them are invested in what some people would call debunking, but is really just, you know, trying to sort out the truly unexplained from the things that just a single person can't explain. And so I call them the agnostics of the UFO community. And then in the middle, you have actually a large proportion of the US population who, you know, a lot of people believe in UFOs, even if they don't spend any time thinking about them. So they're kind of the very, very casual believers who don't do any research and don't have any personal investment. But if you ask them, they would say, yeah, I believe in UFOs. And then on the other end, you have people who have kind of replaced religion with UFOs and who believe everything they hear. Like I was at a conference one time where a person was saying, you know, this president and this general sat down and were talking about aliens, and they said they were in communication with 5 species, and the woman next to me just said, 5 species, wow, that's incredible. And I said, how do you know there's 5 species? But for people who are on the believing end, they just take in information and kind of incorporate it into their UFO worldview. And I kind of came to appreciate that, I think, as a new religion. Like UFO sightings, when people have them, are often very personal and are pseudo-spiritual. They connect them to a mystery, they connect them to a universe, and then they also become part of a community that comes together at, you know, UFO club meetings or something like that, where people can all share their experiences, kind of like you would maybe at a church revival. And it fills a void where instead of having a god, you have an alien who is better at technology than you and maybe has some special knowledge. And at first I thought, you know, why wouldn't you treat this data scientifically? But we don't ask people to do that for other types of spirituality. And I think it makes sense to also not do that for UFOs. One of the hardest parts of writing this book was trying to follow the developing story of what was actually going on with the Pentagon's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, because it seemed like every other month there was a contradictory statement released, either from people in the private sector or people in government, saying it was a UFO program, it wasn't a UFO program, this person worked on it, no, they didn't. And it was impossible to sort it out. I won't say I stopped trying, but at one point, a person who's been researching UFOs for much longer than me pointed out that when you kind of muddy the waters in that way, it becomes impossible to figure out what's going on, and that maybe that is part of the point on both sides. For people on the private sector UFO side, it lets them keep investigating, keep giving talks and publishing books, and within government, it keeps secret whatever you would like to keep secret. And I think the other hardest part was figuring out, especially from my position as a science journalist, like most of the time I'm not writing about UFOs, I'm writing about, satellite programs or particle physics or other things that are a little more grounded than UFOs. And, I have a reputation to keep. And so I both wanted to take a skeptical and critical look about UFOs and UFO culture, but also not be a jerk to the people who I was reporting on. So it was a challenge for me to take these stories that were very personal and meaningful to people and treat them respectfully while maintaining my skeptical distance. So the theme of the book festival is ingenuity, and I actually think that UFOs and the study of UFOs speaks to American ingenuity in a lot of ways. If you go back toward the beginning of modern UFO sightings, a lot of the sightings from the mid 20th century were, for instance, classified aircraft that the military was working on, that we, not me, I wasn't alive, but people who were alive looked up at the sky, thought that is so far beyond anything that I can imagine. It's so strange, it couldn't possibly be ours. But in truth, it was a secret project that we were working on. And I think, that probably plays in some to what we're seeing now, that what we are accomplishing in aerospace is so advanced and confusing that we think that has to come from some other planet. It's too good. But maybe we're just that good, or maybe some other country is just that good. And then I think also kind of on the more ground level interpersonal way of looking at things, the people who are very into UFOs dedicate a lot of time, energy, resources into researching this topic. Like their work, I'm a journalist, I research things for a living. They would regularly uncover things that I had missed or hadn't found. And I think it's just that, a curiosity that people have about this topic that really keeps it going, that I think is meaningful and productive. And I'd like to see it keep going, and maybe someday we can solve all of what's going on. And with that, thank you for having me at the festival, and thank you for listening to this talk.